Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another Community Connection. We'll have a wonderful conversation here with a very special lady, special to us here at Patrick Henry Family Services. But before we do, let's check in with our favorite Gen Zer.
Good morning.
Good morning. It's the Melvinator.
He's wide awake and ready to go.
Actually, I heard a rumor that you came early today.
I did.
Actually dressed professionally.
Oh, my word. Claudia, I heard you do a really nice impression of my laugh before we started recording. Would you mind?
No, that is not going to be public.
Oh.
I tried. I had to try.
Hey, Taylor, you want to know something about me?
Please.
Did you know that I can know if somebody's judgmental by just looking at them?
Okay.
So you can be judgy.
You can judge.
You can be
And I'm
judgy.
looking at Claudia right now, knowing that she's judgmental. She has a prejudice against people who are mathematically challenged.
Good thing that's not me.
Well, it's me, and she reminds me all the time, and I think that is ugly and rude and unfair.
Yeah.
You are so full of it. You think it's hilarious when I mock you about that because you mock yourself about it, so I should be able to mock you. So I sent him a meme last night, in case you're wondering why he's doing this to me. It said, there are three types of people in the world, people who are good at math and people who aren't. And so I thought it was pretty funny, but then he went on about, I have the microphone tomorrow and I'm going to do all that stuff. Whatever.
Oh, stop the whining
So
and introduce.
scared.
Stop the whining and introduce the guest.
Well, Sandra, welcome.
Thank you.
A lot of people know Sandra Lewandowski because she's been around for a long time.
Very long.
Like forever.
And we are celebrating 20 years, so we thought we'd do a little dive into the history of Patrick Henry Boys Plantation, right? And your experiences over 20 years of seeing that evolve to who we are today. But first, why don't you just tell us a little bit about where you were before you came, why you came, and why this work resonates with you.
Okay. So I'm from Brooklyn. I'm sure as soon as I say the first words, we all know that.
Even after 20 years.
Even after 20 years, we joke, my husband and I, when we hear ourselves losing it, we go back to Brooklyn to refresh our Brooklyn accent. Back in 20 years ago, I was working for J.P. Morgan Alternative Assets.
I want to hear the whole title because it's so impressive and where the office was.
The office was in the Fox News building on the 42nd floor, and my title was Senior Executive Assistant for J.P. Morgan Alternative Asset Management.
Pretty impressive, huh?
Sounds impressive anyway.
I bet she knows math.
No, I don't. That's why I was only assistant.
Okay.
But we did hedge funds. I was the executive assistant to the hedge fund teams for JP MAM, is what we called it. And then 9/11 happened.
Okay.
And I watched that happen outside my office window.
Wow.
I'd been born and raised in Brooklyn, never wanted to live anywhere else but Brooklyn. And the year before, was it the year before? No, it was the year after. So after 9/11, I lost my job for reasons I won't go into. And I was out of work for the first time since I was 14. But we had discovered that we could not have children of our own. And while I was out of work, I got pregnant. I found out on a Saturday and miscarried on Tuesday and was devastated. And so we tried for a year and we couldn't get pregnant again. But what had happened was when we found out we couldn't have children, I'd closed my heart down to kids and said, well, we'll just be good aunt and uncle, and didn't think about it. But all my life I had been in children's ministry in my church from the age of 11 on. And that kind of stopped for a bit, not consciously. Anyway, I got another job working for Campus Crusade for Christ in their compassionate urban ministry, Here's Life Inner City. And that was again in Manhattan. And my husband was working in an art gallery. And he calls me one day, he goes, I hate my job. So I looked up, typed in on the internet, Christian jobs, and the only thing that popped up was Houseparenting. So I started reading about it, and I said, well, this sounds good. Stupid me. And we weeded it out based on location and the type of child, and we wanted Christian. So Patrick Henry came up. And we applied and we came down in April of 2003 and interviewed for a weekend. And that was a unique experience when you come from Brooklyn to Brookneal, Virginia.
From Brooklyn to Brookneal.
It should
That's
be
not
a
a
title
straight
of
shot,
book.
is it?
No. And I thought after the interview to myself, oh, good, John will never, my husband will never want to do this work. And when we got in bed that night, I said, what do you think? He goes, I could so do this job. So we moved down in May of 2003. And for the first year, every couple of months or weeks, every day I cried. And for the first couple, I said, John, get me out of here or I'm divorcing you. Like, I am not playing. I want out. And about a year and a half into it, I was in the office at the house where we worked with the kids and crying. We had a parent who had child was there and she was expecting again. And of course, you were already caring for her children and just all kinds of stuff wrong in their life. And I was praying and I said, Lord, I don't understand. I can't do this. Please, take me out of here. I can't do this anymore. And I heard him very clearly say, good, you finally got it. You can't do it alone, but if you let me, I'll do it through you. And we were house parents for 8 years total in the Halifax home. So our why is this is how the Lord gave us our kids. But he brought me to that point when I'd found out that mom was pregnant for a second time because we had a second miscarriage while we were house parenting. And I was crying again, which was pretty standard while I house parented, and said, I don't understand. I've been praying for my own children. Would I be a worse mother than these other parents? And you're just not answering my prayer for children. And he said, wait a minute. This is the Lord. And he says, wait a minute. I have answered your prayer for children. I've given you tons of children who need you. Are you unhappy with the way I've answered your prayer? And I went, okay. I'll be quiet.
Wow.
And so that's what we did. And it's only by God's grace that you house parent. I told Dave Marshall when he was president of the board one time, nobody's growing up going, when I grow up, I want to be a house parent. You know, it's a calling.
I was talking to somebody the other day about the whole space of this substitute parenting, somebody else's second mother, whether it's house parent or a foster parent or adoptive parent, and how people from the outside look at it and say, oh, what a great calling that you have. And isn't that so special and so precious? But it's so enveloped in loss from every perspective. It's the loss of the person who's wishing they were the biological parent of the children they're parenting. There's loss from the child to say, why can't I be with my biological parent? And then there's loss for the biological parent of I'm not capable of or am not able to or made the choice not to parent. So on all sides of this relationship, from the outside, it looks like a beautiful, wonderful thing that people get to do. But in the heart of it, it's loss, and it's grounded in loss, and it's centered in loss, and it's a tension that you manage within yourself of the privilege and the sacred space that it is, but also dealing with your own pain and the pain of the people around you.
Absolutely.
So it's not easy.
I always think of the line from A Tale of Two Cities, the first line in the book. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. And it is. You know that you are trying to help. Your intentions are always good, and you want to help, and you do want to love the children, and you do love the children. But at the same time, you're like, oh, dear Lord, this can't be right.
Well, we could spend 3 hours with you telling us hilarious stories, but why don't you pick a hilarious and appropriate story to share with our audience?
Okay, let me think. Well, there's a couple. One is very short. We had a snow day, and my husband, it wasn't snowing in Halifax County, which is pretty typical. It'll snow in the northern ends of the county and not necessarily in the southern. But this one time, we had a snow day, and my husband walked by the window, and he calls out, hey, kids, it's snowing. And one of the boys yells back, outside? We're like, okay. And then another child, he had won a goldfish at a fair, and he had his little goldfish bowl, and we were getting ready to go to the Shriner Circus, which they generously gave us tickets to every year. So we're all waiting in the van, and our little Billy, we'll call him, wasn't there. He was about 9. So John went in, and he comes back out after about 10 minutes. I'm like, what happened? He goes, I'll tell you later. So it turns out Billy decided that the fishbowl needed to be cleaned. So he brought it into the boys' bathroom, and he poured out the water and was holding the fish in his hand. And he's looking around. He's like, where would I find water to put the fish in till I clean the bowl? And he looked, and he decided to put the fish in the toilet to hold it. And when John got there, Billy had cleaned the fish bowl, and when he went to go back, Nemo had left, you know.
Oh, no.
And our child was on his knees up to his shoulder in the toilet looking for the fish.
That's a precious story.
So he goes, what am I going to do, Mr. L? Because they were allowed to call us Mr. and Mrs. L because Lewandowski's a big mouthful for a little child.
Not just for a little child.
Yes. So John said, it's okay, bud. We'll lock the door from the inside, which John did, then crawled under the door and put a big sign, do not flush this toilet. For 3 days. We had
3 days.
We had 2 other toilets for the children to use, lest you think we made them hold it for 3 days.
And did the fish ever return?
No, of course not. Of course not.
So take us up to speed with how you went from house parenting, and if we close cottages and we don't do residential care, then why are you still here and what are you doing now?
Oh, so that's a good story. So in 2010, Mr. Day came as our new
To
executive.
save the day.
To save the day. And he came, and he did his first staff meeting. I shared this the other day, and we listened to him, and in the car went, 6 months tops. But one of the things he said is, I recognize that a lot of you here as house parents may have other gifts and talents, and if you can see yourself in another position, just come and talk to me. And it's interesting that he should say that because a few months before, my husband, had walked the children to the school bus, and he came back and saw my face. And he said, what's the matter? And I said, do you realize they could give us a 6-year-old tomorrow? 45-year-old women should not be having 6-year-old children anymore. I cannot do this anymore. And it was just God's timing. And so when Mr. Day had said that in a staff meeting, I looked at my husband. He said, go ahead, go speak with them. And I said, I would really like to be back in administration. So it was a few months. I had called him once. I guess you don't want me. He's like, I do. Just wait. And he called, and he said, we're opening a second counseling office, Hope for Tomorrow, in South Boston. On Main Street, we've secured the property. And unbeknownst to him, I said, you're kidding. My husband and I needed a tax write-off. And so we had just started looking at houses, and we looked at a house 6 blocks away from where the new office was going to be. And we put in an offer and bought it. So he invited me to be the office manager for the South Boston Hope for Tomorrow counseling office. And I'm still there, a little bit more than office manager. I've had the privilege of opening not just South Boston, but our Danville, our Farmville, our Bedford, our Brookneal.
Exciting times.
It is. It was at our Appomattox office. And so I serve people. I'm one of those odd people. I enjoy paperwork. I enjoy order, checking boxes, dotting I's, crossing T's. So this is a good fit for me. And I get to help people, indirectly, but I still help them and help the people I work with so that they can focus on helping be on the front lines.
And your current title is?
Director of Operations for Hope for Tomorrow Counseling.
It's a little bit closer to the Manhattan title than house parent.
Little bit.
So we have a commercial talking about what HFT is, right?
Yeah, so let's take a review of Hope for Tomorrow Counseling and the thing that Sandra now is put her hands and heart to.
When I think about Hope for Tomorrow Counseling, I think about a place where people can come from any walk of life, any part of the community.
It's a counseling center that provides hope for families, for individuals, for children.
We are focused on clinical mental health, and we are planning on serving children and families so that children stay safe and families are strong.
We just meet people with a variety of needs. We strive to, make them know that we have a safe place for them to come to talk about whatever they need to talk about, have their needs met, and if we can't do everything for them, then we make sure that we're connecting them to the places and people that they need.
For someone who might come in and see me, and I guess a majority of our counselors, it's going to be for that new person an opportunity to really learn about what that counseling process is like what can you expect? What is my role as the counselor and what is your role as the client?
You're starting a journey that's very new, and so we want to be very welcoming, very understanding, and meet people where they're at.
I want people to walk in the door and to feel like this is a safe place. This is a place where I'm gonna be heard.
It's a dialogue, it's a conversation, kind of what things are they looking for in counseling too.
There's nothing to be afraid of, but you're not going to see anybody until you see your counselor come out to greet you for the first time.
You come to Hope for Tomorrow counseling, but there are so many things that we have direct connections to, so that if we aren't able to maybe meet the need directly with Hope for Tomorrow counseling, we have like our care team, or we have like our camps team that we can really partner with. And I would make the case that we definitely want to be about those community partnerships. I mean, that directly ties into what we're doing as an organization.
We are respecting clients where they're at, whatever spiritual or religious beliefs that they have, and we're getting to know them and what's going to work best for them. Yes, we do have this foundation that we work from, but that is not going to influence or be pushed onto the client, because that's completely against code of ethics that we use. And so we're still working ethically, so that if a client wants to incorporate Christianity, we are here to do that. If they don't, then we absolutely respect that.
We're trauma informed, meaning that we're constantly retraining and getting more expertise in how to help with the trauma that people face.
In some ways, it's a mutual relationship. And just like any mutual relationship, there are different things that each individual are going to bring to that relationship. And so the counselor has a responsibility of walking the individual through the process of healing, of hope, of maybe drawing connections to some things they haven't seen before.
Counselors are very active in collaborating with their clients on what their goals are. So from the very beginning, we're talking about why are you here, what brings you here, and what are your goals? What do you want to gain from this experience, and how can I help you do that?
We help them with, getting comfortable with just settling down, just have conversation. We have comfortable offices that have nice couches and people can relax.
I'm all in on the vision. When I first interviewed and came here, that's where I wanted to be. My wife and I have the opportunity to adopt our daughter at birth. We got a foster son. And so the things that Patrick Henry and Hope for Tomorrow Counseling are about, coming alongside those families to provide the hope, healing, and restoration, that's where I want to be and what I want to be doing.
We carry out that mission in the way that we serve every child, every adult, every parent, every family, every marriage. That amazing quality is one of the biggest things that drew me as a counselor to Hope for Tomorrow.
We've created a space for not only us to be vulnerable with one another, but to really meet clients where they are. We offer opportunities for clients and individuals to really get help where so many other places create so many barriers to that.
When it comes down to the end of the day, are we making a decision that's going to promote the wellness of our clients, or is it going to harm? Because we never want to harm. We absolutely want to promote wellness in every action that we do. And so that kind of myriads all of our programs together, is that compassion is the key to a successful journey in counseling.
That's a cool video. You get to work with some pretty amazing people, don't you, Sandra?
Absolutely. Super amazing people. I just love them all. I'm awestruck by their compassion and their desire and their gifts that the Lord has blessed them with and how they use them to help people. I've seen counselors with very full days get a phone call and give up their lunch to take on another client for that day, to stay late. It's not unusual. I got a text from one of our counselors. She was still at the office. It was 7:30 last night. So their compassion, their love, and their concern for their clients is foremost, always, always.
So you get to be in the middle of that, helping to manage it and organize it and keep it running, right?
I do my best.
Yeah. They're kind of like your kids now, right?
They are. They are. Avery, one of the counselors in the video, calls me Mama Hope sometimes.
Mama Hope.
Mama Hope.
That's nice.
We gotta do that.
Mama Hope.
Oh, we don't, because that's odd.
Yeah.
It is a little strange, but that's
We're not quite
okay.
young enough for that.
It's when they start calling you Mama Hope that you gotta worry about, right?
It's true. It's very true. I'm okay with it, though. One of the counselors, who's also my co-director, Jen Owen, I discovered I'm older than her mother.
Oh, yeah.
That was not a good day for me.
So you're physically located in South Boston.
Yes, sir.
Right, as you mentioned earlier, our counseling centers are in lots of different places, but you're down in South Boston. Tell us about what's going on in that community, and what are some of the needs, particularly that the counselors down there are kind of seeing on a regular basis.
Well, we have 2 full-time counselors there. We do sometimes have a part-time. One of our counselors, Michaela, she does telehealth only, but she'll come and do it one day a week out of our South Boston office. John C. Bernash and Susan Chandler work full-time out of South Boston. They're incredible counselors, very well known in the community. The needs vary. They turn no one away. I've never had them turn anyone away.
Wow.
From the youngest, 3 years old, up, they're always seeing clients. So it ranges anywhere from abuse to grief to suicidal ideations to trauma.
So it's a tough space
It's a tough space
to work in
It
and
is.
to be in. And even though you're not in the counseling session, I'm sure you're aware of some of the stories, and similar to being a house parent, right, where you're kind of on that front line and you're seeing and you're hearing, and it's got to break your heart sometimes.
It
I imagine.
does. It does. When I first started, part of my job was to take all the intakes, and sometimes it hit me when I would pick up the phone and take information that I may be the first person who's hearing this person's story. This may be the first time they're telling it. And it's heartbreaking when it's a mom calling because their child has been assaulted or abused or, killed themselves. I mean, just really heavy, heavy stuff, really heavy stuff. And due to the confidentiality laws, you can't just talk to the client when they're leaving their session, say, so how did it go? But sometimes you'll get a phone call back. I know our current intake coordinator, Tanika Chandler, she's terrific. She's terrific. And what she'll do is they'll call her back sometimes, or they'll call me and they'll say, oh, I spoke with Tanika. She was wonderful. She helped even before my counseling appointment. And you just love hearing that. So it is. It's hard. You do feel a little traumatized. At least when you were house parenting, you were part of the healing. You hoped to be part of the healing process, and you could walk with the child through it. But I'm very grateful for Hope for Tomorrow. When I was a house parent, there was no.
That's right. I was going to mention you came prior to us even starting counseling.
We were
right?
we were house parents 4 years before they opened Hope for Tomorrow.
Which was in Lynchburg, but you had kids and living in South Boston.
Yes.
You guys actually would drive all the way to Lynchburg, wouldn't you, for
We would
counseling?
once a week. We would pack
That
lunches.
had to be stressful.
It was okay.
Yeah.
I didn't mind. I got to talk to the counselor, so I think that helped too.
Yeah. So one of the reasons why we opened the second one in South Boston was to cover the kids there where you were, but also we had a home in Wiley'sburg.
We did.
And that was even further for them to come all the way to Lynchburg. So it was to relieve some of the pressure the house parents were
Yes.
feeling and the kids were feeling, because all the kids got to wait. Why? They kind of go through sometimes one at a time.
Absolutely.
And there were behavior problems in the van. And, of course, I'm not telling you anything you didn't already know.
And then just the drive, and then the pulling them out of school,
Yeah.
and them losing school time and everything. So no, opening South Boston was huge.
Yeah.
It was so beneficial.
But it gave us really the first time a chance to do work with the family rather than just take care of their children, to try to piece and bring some healing to all of that, wasn't it?
It was. As a house parent, one of the biggest challenges was to get the family to come in and join the child for counseling. And because we didn't have our own counseling centers, offices, a lot of times if a child lived in South Boston, the child's family could be in Petersburg.
Yeah.
And then they would have to come to Lynchburg or Danville to attend a group counseling session, because we had to use the counseling offices that were available in the community. And you just couldn't get the parents to do it. They're working. Sometimes the hurt and the break in the relationship was too great. They didn't want to be bothered and stuff. So it really we made it counseling a part of the plan for the child to be in the home.
And still today, Vision 30, it will not be accomplished if there's not mental health
Absolutely.
services being offered to the whole family and to the
Absolutely.
child, right? Trauma, as mentioned in the video, is such a big part of this.
Absolutely.
We've got to try to stay ahead of this, but it feels like an overwhelming, impossible task.
Every child, I think, has some form of trauma. It may not be as severe as what other people go through, but it traumatized the child. But where does that come from? Because it's usually generational. So if a child is being traumatized, probably the parent, and they've probably never dealt with their trauma.
Exactly.
And so it's just such a wonderful process, the counseling process. And I'm so sad that there's such a stigma, or still is in some communities, a stigma attached to it. And
it
it's
is.
such a helpful thing.
Well, let's move off of such a heavy topic.
I have an idea.
Yes,
how
what's your
how
idea?
to finish off. Did you have an idea how to finish off?
I have one last question, but you go ahead.
I was thinking that we said that usually we have the person look at the camera and give an ask. I think it would be great if Sandra could look at the camera and give people tips on how do you do a hard thing and how do you keep doing a hard thing if God calls you to stay instead of to go, because it's always great when God calls us to go do something new. But how do you stick around for 20 years in something that's not always fun and make it? And that could be her
All right.
final
So
words.
before you do that, I've got one more question for you.
Yes, sir.
So do you see yourself sticking around for another 20? What's the plans for the Lewandowskis? And
Right.
share what you feel comfortable with.
Yes, of course. Well, to retire from working at some point, but I always see myself involved. And I've got about 10 years to go before I hit full retirement age, according to the government. So let's see how that goes. But I always see myself involved. I don't see, and I have not felt the Lord moving me or saying, if the Lord said tomorrow, San, and he has to say it to John too, I see yous. I see yous, because he speaks in Brooklyn. I see yous moving back to Brooklyn. We would go.
Yeah.
So the reason we stay is because we're trying to be obedient to the calling the Lord has placed. I should say that through Patrick Henry, we found a wonderful church in South Boston, and John became an ordained minister and is now pastoring a small church in South Boston. So we love that. We love the community of South Boston. We love the people there. We love our church family. So tips for doing a hard thing.
Before you do that,
Yes,
let me just
sir.
say, if you make it another 10 years, which I pray that happens, you'll probably be tied with the longest serving, right? Bob McCullough served 31 years. I think after that, you're probably you're in second place right now at 20, as far as I know, as the longest serving person
Really?
in this organization. So
Wow.
we're all cheering you on, Sandra.
I'll do my best. I'll do my best. I think I learned a long, long time ago, before we ever came to Patrick Henry, there is no better place to be than in the center of God's will, even when it's a hard place to be. Last night at Bible study, John, my husband, was going to start a study on Samuel and postponed it a week, and instead he reviewed some of the names of God. And one of the first name he went through is, "You are my hiding place." And I love the book, The Hiding Place. Corrie ten Boom's one of my heroes. And that whole story and how she was in a concentration camp, and that was one of the first verses, that the Lord was her hiding place. And I'm not saying house parenting, I'm not comparing it to being in a concentration camp by any stretch. But there is the truth. When you're in a hard place, He is your shelter. He is your refuge. And then John, my husband, went on to say, sometimes, you come to your shelter and God allows you to be there, but then He's going to push you out. And that's what it is. He pushes you into that hard thing. And then two of the other names from Revelation were faithful and true. And that's what it is. The only tip I really have is you have to trust. If this is where the Lord has called you to be, and in your hard spot, it's so odd to look at a camera, I'm sorry. You have to trust that He will be faithful and true, even in the very hard times. And use Him as your resting place, your hiding place, your refuge, and He will be faithful and true. He gives you hope to cope. And that's what He does. That's my big tip. There's no big secret. One of my sweet friends, when her daughter and her daughter and daughter's husband were going to the mission field, her daughter hit a frustrating point. And her mom said, go out into the field, you and your husband, and just scream out to the Lord. Scream, get it out. And do that. It's okay. God understands. But don't be disobedient. Be faithful to Him, and He's faithful. He's just so faithful. He can't be unfaithful. And that's what the tip is.
It's a good word.
Well,
and with that, we will end. Thank you, Mama Hope, for sharing that with us.
Thank you for inviting
and
me.
we do hope maybe in 10 years we'll have this conversation again.
I hope you're still here.
I know that you enjoyed this conversation today. Thank you,
did.
Sandra, for being
Thank you.
here. Thank you, Miss Claudia. And we'll see you next Thursday on Community Connection.
Nobody gets to choose their family. If a person is fortunate enough to be born into a healthy family, then life can be much like floating down a smooth, gentle river in the summertime. But an unhealthy family is like a dangerous river, filled with rocks, debris, and fast-moving water. This river swiftly leads to the steep waterfall of adulthood, tragically forming a new river of dysfunction. Even if you aren't born into an unhealthy river, there are many streams that cause a person to get there. But there is only one way to get out, and that is through a meaningful relationship. Across our region, there are many agencies, churches, and families who are devoted to helping children escape from unhealthy rivers. Some feel their role is to wade in and rescue children. They foster, adopt, or provide safe families. Others stand by the river and support the rescuers by providing what they need. Still, others are upstream and stand in the gap to keep children from ending up in the negative situations. At Patrick Henry Family Services, we see ourselves as having an additional role. We are running up and down the shores of the unhealthy river, screaming, "Can't you see the children in the water? You have to do something." Vision 30 is a 10-year initiative. By 2030, we envision a region where all children are safe in their own family, or with caregivers who are supported by a local faith community. So, where do you stand at the river? Are you upstream, keeping families together and strong by standing in the gap? Are you in the river, directly impacting children? Are you on the shore, providing support for the brave folks who have entered the river? Or are you just passing by without noticing? No matter who you are, come down to the river with us. Let us help you find your place. Not only will lives be changed, but you will never be the same.